I'm Jeannie Callum, and I'm a hematologist and a transfusion medicine specialist at the University of Toronto. And this very short video is going to give a little bit more information about Cytomegalovirus, with the primary objective of answering the question, can we confidently abandon the use of CMV seronegative products in the era of modern leukoreduction? You might be saying, really, are we still talking about this in 2017? And that's because many of us in the last 5 to 10 years have completely abandoned ordering this product. But unfortunately, many hospitals continue to order this. And on the most recent data, 5% of red cells ordered in Canada are CMV seronegative, and an incredible amount of 25% of the platelets. And most of this is unnecessary, and it's an improper use of healthcare resources. So this brief little bit here is on the basic biology of CMV. We get infected with this through contact with our mucosal epithelial cells. Most of us get exposed to this either at birth or through breast milk. But you can also get exposed to it through any kind of sexual contact, blood transfusion, stem cell transplantation, solid organ transplant, or the use of IV drugs. There are two kinds of infection. Your primary infection, when you first get exposed to the virus, but then the virus remains latent in your white blood cells for the remainder of your life. And anytime you get sick, including even postpartum, you reactivate with the virus, and then you eventually, once you get better, you get the virus infection back under control. About 40% of Canadians are CMV seropositive, and we have one of the lowest rates of CMV infection in the developed world. About 1% of CMV seronegative blood donors every year seroconvert, and that's just your chance of getting exposed to this virus and picking it up every year. So that younger people are less likely to be CMV seropositive, and older donors are more likely to be CMV seropositive. This slide here just tries to graphically describe the epidemiology of CMV. So 99.99% of CMV transmission is not from blood transfusion. It's through breast milk contact and sexual contact. The little dot for the blood transfusion, it's as small as Microsoft will let you make that dot, but it should be smaller. Over the last 50 years, we've really gotten CMV transmission under control in the blood system. When we started with fresh, warm, whole blood after the Second World War, 1 in 2 units of blood transmitted CMV, and that's because you were transfusing fresh, warm, viable lymphocytes. In just putting the blood in the fridge, reduced that risk to 1 in 100. When we went to CMV seronegative, non-leukoreduced blood, you dropped it to 1 in 66,000. But by the time we got to pre-storage, leukoreduction, with highly efficient technology, we're now to 1 in 13 million risk of transmission. That's similar to your risk of transmission of hepatitis C, which is a much more concerning virus. Because the risk is 1 in 13 million, we will never have clinical trials comparing a population of patients exposed to leukoreduced only compared to leukoreduced plus CMV seronegative. So those trials will never happen, so we need to stop waiting for them. Scientists have tried to figure out who is the best, safest donor for our patients in terms of CMV transmission. And this study here from Transfusion looked at a whole bunch of different kinds of donors. The first one they looked at were the 150 donors that were CMV seronegative, and looked at what percentage of them you could pick up CMV DNA, and it was 0%. Similarly, if you took a CMV seropositive donor, but whose infection was greater than a year away, they tested 450 donors, and 0 of them had CMV seropositive DNA. But when they looked at patients who were tested seronegative, but we know from their next donation that they're in that seroconversion period, now you start to pick up the CMV positive DNA, and 2 out of 68 were positive. By the time they come back for their next donation, it's 36 out of 82 donors. And so that's where you start to see the transmission is during that window period. Scientists have also looked at CMV positive donors and looked at how many they can pick up CMV DNA. There were 2 studies that looked at over 1,000 donors, and they could find no donor with DNA positivity. Another study of over 7,000 donors could pick up only 1 donor that was DNA positive with a very low level of IgG and a very low level of DNA, and it's unclear whether or not that donor could possibly transmit given that they have a low level of IgG. And so this kind of data has led to the recommendation that the safest possible donor for CMV transmission is actually a CMV positive donor who had their primary infection more than a year ago, and now they're under tight control of their CMV virus and have a large amount of IgG anti-CMV. So leukoreduction is extremely effective. So if you look at the data for pre-storage leukoreduction, and let's focus first on this slide on platelets. So the FDA requires you to get it below 5 times 10 to the 6 white cells per bag. Other countries have more stringent, you got to get below 1 times 10 to the 6. The platelet data for Canada, it was 0.00 times 10 to the 6. So several logs below the target with 100% pass rate. Similarly, for red cells, the amount of antibodies per bag was 0.07 times 10 to the 6 white cells with a pass rate of 99.8%. So at least 1 log below the most stringent country's target. So I think we can be very confident in Canadian Blood Services' ability to hit these targets. Other researchers, such as this one from the ABB, did a systematic review of clinical studies where patients were randomized to different types of CMV prevention products. They had 11 studies, 7 in patients undergoing stem cell therapy, 4 in premature infants. Only 3 of these studies were in the modern era of pre-storage leukoreduction and are really applicable to what we see today. The infant studies were very problematic because these premature infants were also fed CMV seropositive infected breast milk from their mothers, which really we know not to be harmful to these infants. And there was no attempt to link the donor to the recipient to know when a donor was transmitted to a recipient that it was actually from that particular donor. So there are lots of limitations to these clinical studies. So on this systematic review from this graph, you can see they could find no evidence that the combination of CMV seronegative on top of leukoreduction was better than leukoreduction alone. Other clinical researchers, such as this one from Michigan, tried a little different tactic to figure out that CMV leukoreduction alone was adequate. They followed 100 CMV seronegative bone marrow transplant patients receiving CMV seronegative products from their HLA matched donor. They were followed weekly for CMV DNA. They were transfused over 3,500 blood components that were leukoreduced only, and they did not have a single seroconversion. They did find that 2 of these 100 patients had transient IgG positivity for CMV because of passive transmission of antibodies from their donors. Both Oxford, Birmingham, and the Ottawa Hospital have also done this exact same study and found exactly the same thing. In terms of premature neonates, a lot of neonatologists have been very reluctant to go to CMV leukoreduced alone. I think this is where we really have the best data. So Cassandra Josephson did a very important study where she looked at 462 mothers with 539 infants, and of these, 76% of these mothers were CMV antibody positive, which is probably where most countries sit in terms of their seroprevalence of CMV. 7% of these infants in the first 12 weeks had active CMV infection, and they found that 96% of these cases, the infection was coming from the mother's breast milk. One other case was from another contact, but not from the blood products. So they had 0% of cases where they could link it back to the blood product. And so given that all of our premature neonates are routinely being exposed to CMV through their breast milk, and the risk of transmission from a blood product is 1 in 13 million, it makes absolutely no sense that premature neonates need leukoreduction as well as CMV seronegative products. So the National Advisory Committee on Blood and Blood Products for Canada came out with several recommendations, and here are 2 of them. So the NAC recommends that CMV safe, leukoreduction alone, and CMV IgG seronegative components be considered equivalent, except for patients undergoing intrauterine transfusion. It's possible for intrauterine transfusion, they're also equivalent, there just wasn't enough data, and there was enough concern across the country that for this very isolated indication of intrauterine transfusion, the combination product will be provided. They also recommended that NAC recommends that CVS stop the current process of testing and provision of CMV seronegative units issued to hospitals and develop a new process to maintain a small boutique inventory of CMV seronegative for the sole purpose of intrauterine transfusion. So starting in this fall, CVS will no longer be providing CMV seronegative in addition to leukoreduction, except to the 5 hospitals that do intrauterine transfusions. So in summary, CMV is present in half of the population, and transfusion is, if ever, is not a common route of infection. The risk of CMV transmission from pre-storage leukoreduction is approximately 1 in 13 million. It's exceptionally rare. The blood donor CMV science suggests the safest donor might actually be a CMV positive donor who is at least out 1 year after their primary infection. Modern day leukoreduction failures are almost never for platelets, and they're very, very rare for red cells. There's no proven case of CMV transmission from leukoreduced blood components. And unless you do intrauterine transfusion, there's no longer any reason to order CMV seronegative products in Canada. For a more detailed presentation with additional information, please click on the links provided adjacent to this video, both a PowerPoint with audio with a lot more information that your clinicians might want to hear, as well as a PowerPoint in case you want to go to rounds within your hospital and do a personalized educational intervention with your clinical team members. Thank you.